Thank you very much for joining us here in this session. Just to clarify something, we had a change of the title in the last few days, as some of you noticed. The session is still the same, however, the objective. Today, we're going to be talking about the different learning key points that people go through in the process of learning Silverlight or WPF, any XAML-based platform. And we're going to pay particular attention on the learning curve for designers. My name is Arturo Toledo. I'm a designer audience product manager for Microsoft. My background is in design. I studied architecture, and then I moved into interactive design at some point in my life. And well, one of the things that I co-own within the company is this training program called the Artist in Residence training program. You might have heard about that. This training program has two versions. The external version, which allows Microsoft to get to meet all these wonderful agencies from all over the world, the US and all over the world, and they visit us in Redmond for a few days and build a small mini Silverlight experience from scratch. So that gives them the opportunity to build everything from the beginning, even if they don't know anything. They go there and learn. So instead of having the typical instructor-led training that is just talking and showing demos, we actually get people to play with the actual tools and to build something real. Now, with the second version of that program is an internal version called the Microsoftie in Residence. So what we do, and of course considering Microsoft has 70,000 employees, as you can expect, we have literally hundreds of designers, internal designers, that we have to train, as well as developers, in the creation of Silverlight and WPF. So what we do is we organize this 5-day event. No PowerPoint today, certainly. And one of the things we do is we organize a 5-day event in which we invite these Microsofties from MSN, Game Studio, Zoom, Xbox, Windows Office as well, all the teams basically. And they go through the process of learning Silverlight in particular through 5 days. The first day and a half, what we do is we provide some instructor-led training. So yes, we do have an instructor providing demos and driving people through some of the basic concepts that are involved in the creation of Silverlight. Then on Tuesday morning, we have people work on something called a creative proposal, which is this one developer and one designer, because they work in teams of one developer and one designer. They get to decide what kind of fictitious project they want to work with the rest of the week. They're free to choose whatever fun, crazy thing they can think of. It could be a game, it could be an interactive experience online, something that, I don't know, better, interesting ways to improve data visualization. They can choose anything they want. At half of that day, they present us their creative proposal, and they tell us what they're going to be doing through the rest of the week. And starting at that point, we go into hands-on the project. And what we have at that point is something called mentors, just people that are walking all over the classroom, and they're just answering questions, focusing on that specific project these guys are building. Now, one of the interesting things about this is that throughout the session, we touch different topics, and we cover different learning key points that we know people are interested in going through. After doing this for more than a year, we have identified the key aha moments, or the key, wow moments that people go through in 1 week. So the objective of this session is to present to you all that collection of tips and tricks that people learn in 1 week in 1 hour. So it's certainly going to be quite challenging, a lot of information, but we're going to keep it very simple and very conceptual as well. One of the things that is interesting to see about this is that this is the percentage of time that we spend on 3 different topics that are important for Silverlight. The first one is the platform. So we spend the first hour talking about the platform. For a lot of designers, the concept of a platform existing is something completely new, because they have traditionally used tools, not platforms. So explaining what the platform is from the point of view of Microsoft, WPF, Silverlight, XAML, that's the first barrier of entry that we've found in designers. After that, we spend 1 full day talking about the tools, Expression Design, Expression Blend, and also how other tools that exist in the market, like Illustrator or Photoshop, collaborate with with these other tools from Expression. And then the rest of the week is focused on something called workflow. And I'm sure you guys have been hearing a lot about designer-developer collaboration coming from Microsoft. Well, workflow is the big thing. So here, it's clear to see that the most of the time that you and your teams in your agencies or development companies will have to invest on will be about learning the workflow. We think that the tools is relatively straightforward, but the workflow, understanding how best practices and collaboration, that's where you will be really mastering the technology. So, as I mentioned, the first thing that we go through is explaining what the platform is. And the first thing that we also try to help designers understand is that there are two main types of experiences that they can build using Silverlight or WPF. They can build marketing and content-driven experiences, maybe like the Aston Martin demo that we saw at the keynote, the Hard Rock demo that we saw at the keynote. But then we also have the concept of applications. Applications are experiences that enable you to achieve functional tasks. Perhaps something like Popfly. Most of you, I'm sure, know about Popfly, or even the Top Banana video editing application that we showed on the last MIX event. A lot of applications. This area is growing tremendously on the web. So using this XAML-based platform that we can target all these experiences. Now, the name of the session is XAML Ready Agency. It's not Silverlight Ready Agency or WPF Ready Agency. The interesting thing about that is that XAML is a unified layer across our different platforms, or versions of our platforms. We have WPF, we have Silverlight 2, and Silverlight 1. But XAML remains. So all the concepts that we're going to go through today are standard throughout all those platforms. And in some cases, in particular with Silverlight 1, they're approached a little differently. So I'll try to highlight what those differences are throughout the session. One interesting thing about here as well is that XAML is a presentation layer, while .NET is a code layer. So moving forward with Silverlight 2 and WPF, we're unifying everything to be created with XAML and .NET. Now, Expression Studio, as you know, is the set of tools for designers that help designers create XAML. That's the bottom line. And so understanding XAML is one of the most interesting things for designers, the first hour that we talked about. And the way that we usually explain what XAML is we go to Expression Blend. I'll just create a new project. It will be just a Silverlight project. And one of the new things we have in Expression Blend 2 is we have a split view. And the split view allows us to see, let me make this a little smaller, allows us to see the visual surface as well as the code. Let me make the UI a little smaller. You guys might have seen this feature before. So the way this works is, of course, I can draw an ellipse, which I have right here. And you will notice that down there in the code, we got an ellipse tag. So I can go to my ellipse tag and change the fill to red by changing the code. And that will reflect back on the visual surface. So when we show this mini super simple demo, designers immediately, I've gotten comments from designers, well, isn't this more similar to what Dreamweaver or Expression Web do? This feels to me more like that because I have the code, I have the markup, I change the code, the visuals update, or vice versa. So that was an interesting observation that I got from one of the attendees one day. This feels much closer to HTML than it is to Flash from that point of view. So that's one of the key learnings that designers go through at the very beginning. XAML is much closer to HTML than it is to Flash. At the same time, however, we have a collection of different XAML tags that are available for us. Imagine that we have been able to have all these kind of tags in HTML for the last 10 years. Ellipse, rectangle, path, canvas, a container control, storyboard, which is our tag that defines animation. Those tags, as rich as they are, they have not existed in HTML. So that's what XAML is bringing. It's bringing additional power to what HTML has been able to offer us in a much richer way. For example, if I go back to Expression Blend, and let me go here, and let's do a small little animation, just creating a new storyboard. We're going to get into animation much deeper a little later, but I'll simply move this element over here. And with that, you will notice that here in the code, we got a storyboard tag and a bunch of other tags that I'll explain later. But this storyboard tag is defining this animation, which I can now play. So again, tags that feel like HTML, but that are able to produce much richer experiences, of course. Now, XAML is important, and of course, using Blend, you can create XAML. One of the things that we have to learn about as well is that elements in XAML can have, only one element can have one name in XAML. So names are unique. So if, for example, you go to Expression Blend and you make a copy of this ellipse, you might have noticed that down here it's a little small, but you get a different name, ellipse_copy. So you can only have one element with one name. Now, using Blend, you have different drawing tools. You have, for example, a Bezier drawing tool, which allows you to draw Bezier curves just the way that we are used to in any other tool. And we have basically a very small set of drawing tools. So if you want to have more drawing power to create XAML, one of the things that we're offering, oops, I'm actually zooming in the browser, is Expression Design. Now, I'm sure you've heard about Expression Design. We have very interesting new features in Expression Design too. Let me show you the main 4 techniques for you to create XAML from Expression Design. So let me go to Expression Design. This is Expression Design. Expression Design is a small tool that helps you create vector-based graphics. This tool includes something I usually describe to designers as 20% of the features that you use 80% of the times in Illustrator. So most of the features that you will require to create illustrations, vector artwork, live effects, they're all here. We're focusing on the creation of bitmap elements and vector-based images. Now, another traditional confusion we get about Expression Design is comparing it to Photoshop. Well, the big difference with Photoshop, of course, is that Photoshop is a bitmap editing tool, where Expression Design is in the vector side of things. So it's completely different. In our workflow, a lot of designers continue to use Photoshop to edit their photographs, to crop their images, to adjust their levels, et cetera, et cetera. Now, here in design, well, I have different elements. The thing that I'm going to be showing you right now is copy-pasting. So one of the new features in Expression Design 2 is the ability to simply copy-paste design elements from design into Expression Blend by simply pressing Ctrl-C and Ctrl-V. So I can select all my friends here and press Ctrl-C, go to Expression Blend. Let's create a new project, just so it's nice and empty, and let's press Ctrl-V. And that brings in the 4 sisters, or mom, daughter, granddaughter, I don't know what they are. And they are now here. It's exactly the same design elements, but what happened is that we got all the XAML code automatically generated for us. So as a designer, you don't really have to think most of the times in XAML code. Even though it's cool that it's very similar to HTML and it's relatively easy to read, still you don't want to draw by coding, right? You want to use your mouse or your Wacom tablet, which is also supported here in design. Now, so that's the first way of bringing elements into Expression Blend, from Expression Design into Expression Blend. The next technique is by exporting selection. And exporting selection is, of course, something that we've all used forever in any other tool, nothing that should be new, but it is new in Expression Design 2 because we did not support that previously. So now we have export selected objects, which is wonderful. And I can export this, and I will replace, because I guess I already had that image there. And let me just come in here. Those images are saved by default under the Expression Design folder. Here it is. So I can go to Blend and just drag and drop. Now that drag and drop action you might have seen, it's also something new in version 2 of Expression. You can drag and drop files directly from Windows Explorer into the design surface. So you don't have to go add existing item or import or those kind of things anymore. Just drag and drop. The other technique we have to export is something that I actually have here as something called new super slicing feature, because I really, really love it. This super slicing feature is pretty cool. Let me show you how it works. And to understand why we designed this feature this way, we have to understand that when designers create a user interface like this, they overlay all the elements depending on where they are going to be showing up at the end. In traditional slicing methods, what designers usually need to do is they need to start separating all the elements to different positions so they can cut them out or trigger visibilities on and off, etc., etc. So what we did is we created slices. So you can draw slices. I can draw a slice right there. But the cool thing about design is you can draw overlapping slices, as many as you want. And that is something that is pretty useful, as we're going to see right now. I can select an object, right-click, and say Create Slice from Selection. So create a slice out of the sun. And here on the right side of the screen, we'll see a preview of what is being exported. We can see we're preserving only the element, and we're getting a transparent background automatically. I didn't have to turn off layers or anything, because Expression Design knows that I only want the sun. So even though I have the background down there. Same thing with the, I'll do the same thing with the cloud, and let's do the same thing with the rain. Just right-click, create slice from selection. Now for the thunder, I'll do it manually to show you one other feature. I'll draw a slice over the thunder, and here, because I drew it manually, now the background, a little bit of the rain and a little bit of the cloud are being included. So what I can do is that you can actually select all the individual elements that are going to be included in that slice. So for example, I have all the elements that are stacked on that area, and I can deselect or select the elements that I want. In my case, I do not want the rain, I do not want the cloud, I do not want the sun, and I do not want the background. I just want the thunder. So as you notice there, we have full control on how all the different pieces that are exported. By the way, for each of these elements, you can choose specifically what kind of format you want to export to. So the sun, because it has live effects or bitmap effects are not currently supported in Silverlight 1 or 2. So anything that has effects like this Gaussian blur that we have here needs to be rasterized. So I can simply choose PNG, and the effects will be included. For this cloud, which is made entirely out of vectors, I could export this as XAML. So now we have this control, very detailed control on how we want to export each of these different pieces, something that in the past, in Expression Design 1, was a little harder to do. Once you get all this done, you can simply go to File, Export, and you get your 4 slices, all with those individual selections and definitions that we chose. And you can simply hit Export. And I'll replace all the ones that I had. And if I go to my folder here, you'll see I have slice 1, 2, 3, and 4. I can just select all of them, go back to Blend, and drag and drop them in here. And now I have another of my the sun, the thunder, which is right here, my cloud, which is a XAML file. So you get individual pieces. So right now, what I've shown you have been 3 methods of exporting XAML. Let me show you one more, which is basically exporting the whole user interface. I don't want slices, I don't want little pieces, I want the whole thing to just be transferred into Expression Blend. In this case, I have this very simple button user interface with different states that I can just go to File, Export. In this case, it's going to be the whole document. So this gives you a preview of how it will look once it's transferred to XAML. And I will just hit, let's actually browse and maybe save this on the desktop. Hit Export, and let me show you what Expression Design created. It created 2 things. It created a PowerPlay XAML file, which includes all the code that represents those graphics. But it also automatically created a folder called also PowerPlay_files, in which Expression Design stored automatically the PNGs that it knew we were going to require because of some effects, some outer glow effects that, as I said, are not supported in Silverlight, so they're rasterized. If you want to include this inside of Expression Blend, again, let me create a new project so we have a clean surface. And I'll just drag and drop PowerPlay.xaml into Expression Blend. And Expression Blend is smart enough to know that this XAML file has some dependencies on external images, our PNGs that I showed you, and it automatically imported these images into the folder. So I can double click over PowerPlay.xaml, and I now have all my images here. By the way, if you press the Tab key, you can hide those palettes. And basically, this is exactly the same graphics we had in design, but they just moved over here. So 4 techniques for you to bring in elements from Expression Design into Expression Blend. And as you noticed, we have a range of different things, from copying individual elements into Blend to exporting the entire user interface. Depending on your scenario, you will be able to choose all these different options. In the past, again, in Expression Design 1, we basically had only one option, which was just export. Now there's much more flexibility. Now, some of the interesting things about Expression Design and XAML in general is to understand that vectors, So all these kind of elements like this one, which is vector-based, these vectors do get converted into SAML pads that have coordinates. So if I go here to maybe one of my pads, like this one, for example, you will see that all these numbers represent the coordinates for that specific shape. So vectors do get converted into SAML. However, bitmap elements like this one over here, let me show you. This one over here, which has a live effect, it's an outer glow that we applied in expression design. This one gets exported as a PNG. So bitmap images are not converted into SAML, like as in pixel-based coordinates. What we get is we get a reference to an external PNG or JPEG image, same way that it works in HTML. So if I go back here to blend, and I look for one of these images, let me see where we have one. Here's one. So we have something called an image tag, and the image tag has a source property that points to that file. So this is exactly the same way that HTML works. That's another of the differences that designers learn in the first few hours compared to Flash, where in Flash, you import all these images and they become part of your Swift file, your movie clip. They're there. You no longer need to refer to them as image01.png. Well, in Silverlight, Silverlight and WPF, the concept is just different. They just continue to be external images. These will change, of course, with the new packaging method that is coming up in Silverlight, which will embed those images as part of our project. But I'm not going to get there. But conceptually, this is what happens. Now, let's talk about Expression Blend. So in Expression Blend, we have different things that are very eye-opening for designers. Because, of course, when designers get there at that first hour in the morning, the first thing they have on their minds is Flash, right? Because that's what we've all used for years and years, and we know how to use it really well. So all those metaphors, the way we animate in Flash, the way we use movie clips in Flash, the way we do frame-based animation in Flash, we, of course, have all those initial expectations and needs even, right, from a creative point of view. So let me explain a few of the things that are typical confusions. The first thing is that objects in the Expression Blend surface are shown in the reverse order in which they are listed. So let me go to Blend, and I'll zoom in here. And for instance, this element here is at the top, at the very top. However, if you take a look at this list over here, let me make this a little bigger for you. If you take a look at this list over here on the left, it's this element, even though it's at the top, it's at the bottom of the list. And we always get that question from designers, why are my elements all the way to the bottom if they're at the top? Well, there is a logical explanation for this, and the explanation for this is that objects are rendered in the order in which they are described here in the SAML code, same way as in HTML. So the last element to be rendered is the one that is going to be on top. That is why these elements are in the reverse order compared to what we are used to in Flash, for example. However, one little trick that not a lot of people know, we have a little arrow down here, little shy arrow down here called Arrange by Z order. If I click this button, notice how all these objects are going to flip. So what we do is we know some people still want to see elements the way they're stacked, so that little arrow will inverse the visuals for those elements. However, the SAML is intact, right? It's still preserved, so it's only an aid for you. I personally, definitely encourage you to try to learn the way that it actually works, because it'll just make life easier for you in upcoming projects, I'm sure. But if not, you always have that little arrow available there. Another thing we have here is Z-index versus SAML object order, another traditional question we get. So if this element, for example, that I was talking about, again, I'm going to be going back and forth between these two. This element is on top, but this element has a Z-index property right here. So if I change this, well, it was probably not noticeable, but let me change this one, actually. If I type -1 on Z-index, the element goes all the way to the back. However, the element has not moved here, and it was not moved in SAML. That means that the Z-index property overrides whatever the order of the SAML structure is describing for that particular object. to understand more about this, I have a little example. Let me open another instance of Expression Blend. By the way, you can only open one project at a time in Expression Blend, but you can open as many instances of Blend as you want. So let me open, I have a carousel little application here. And are we losing sound? I hear weird things. So by the way, visual assets provided by a wonderful artist, Dan Cook. He led our program management team for expression design in Microsoft. He's a very talented artist, so I'm just taking advantage of his cool graphics. Let me press F5. F5 is like Control-Enter in Flash. And here, when I roll over the little faces, they grow. Now, they're not doing what I want, right? Because when I roll over this girl, or this, I don't know if this is a girl or a boy, but anyway, when I roll over here, I want this element to be all the way on top, right? Not hiding there. So what I can do is I can change the C order to get to do that. Now, the C order is better changed if you use code. In this case, I'm using JavaScript, but could be C# if you're using Silverlight 2 or WPF. So let me just uncomment these couple lines. And these two lines are basically just changing the C index. So let's run this little carousel again. And now when I roll over, we're playing with the C index. So the when you want to move elements on top of each other, you do not have to move all the XAML code for that element. You simply have to play with the Z index. It's a more dynamic way of doing it. Okay. The other thing is three concepts that cause a lot of confusion as well. Hide object, the eye icon I'll show you, versus opacity versus visibility. So let me go back here to our button. And so the hide icon that we have here, this little eye, the only thing it does is it temporarily hides objects while in authoring time, while in Expression Blend. But right now, if I press F5, nothing will show up. Oh, I know why. But let me see if I still have this. I can probably show you here. So let's go to this little girl and hide her. But if I press F5, she's still showing up. Again, that's just authoring time. We're having a problem. Yeah.
It's going bad.
Yeah.
Turn it off.
Is that better? Yeah, okay. So that's what the hide icon does, the little eye over here. Now, there is another way for you to turn off elements, and that is by using opacity. So we have a property called opacity here on the right side of the screen. So again, selecting the same girl, I can change the opacity to 80, 70, 60, 50, 40%, anywhere I want, all the way to 0%. If I press F5, she's gone. Now, she's still there, actually. So if I go roll over, you might see the little hand showing up. She's still there. She's just not visible. Now, there is another way. If you, for example, are using a panel and you want to hide it for some time in a user interface, another way that you can do that is by using this property right here called the visibility property, which has two options, visible or collapsed. If it's visible, that means the object is available on the scene, it's fully rendered, it's considered in the layout passes that Silverlight or WPF do. But if you change this to collapsed, it's the closest thing to removing the element from memory. So it's a better performance practice to have elements set to collapsed and not only to opacity 0% when you are simply not using those elements. And that takes me to explain another concept, which is the concept of, I'm going to leave these two for a little later, the concept of Silverlight and WPF being like creating a one-frame Flash movie. That's the way we usually explain it. The reason for that is that all the elements that exist in your, let me go here to Blend. This is where I want to be. All the elements that exist here in Blend need to exist there at the same time. So let me open up a little project here called PowerPlay Transition. It's using the same button that we had here. In this case, this button is already working. But let me show you what we have here. This is the typical scenario where we have two screens, which is also a very common question we get. If I want two screens in my application, how do I go from screen 1 to screen 2 if we do not have frames? Because we don't have frames in Silverlight and WPF. I'll explain how that works. The way we would do this in Flash is by doing something like this. Something like this. One of the many ways in Flash to go from screen to screen, right? You have a nice transition, you have a stop, and you're on screen number 1. You wait for user input, user clicks something, go to and play, next transition, another stop, etc., etc. And you go from screen to screen. One of the typical ways of doing it in Flash. We do not have frames in Silverlight and WPF. The concept of frames do not exist. So the only way for us to create something like this is to have all our elements that are going to exist in our scene available at the same time. So here what I have is I have one container control called a canvas, which is a screen 01, and this includes my button. I have another screen, screen 02, that includes other elements that are currently hidden. Let me just turn them on so you can see how the screen number 2 will look like. So we have other elements. So what's happening here is at the same time, in a single moment, I have these two screens available in there. It simply happens that the screen 2 elements are hidden. I'm using opacity right now. So if I wanted to create a transition between the screen number 1 and screen number 2, what I can do is I can create a new storyboard. I'll call it transition. And I will press F6, which will switch to animation layout mode. You probably noticed the timeline got placed down here. That gives me a much better workspace area and a much longer timeline to work with. So the menu bar, I want the menu bar to drop from the top. Right now, I am recording. So if I am recording, everything that I do will be stored in keyframes, not in frames, because frames don't exist, but keyframes inside of my timeline. So I'll turn this off for a second to not record, and I'll move my menu bar up here. And now I will record. Maybe I'll move this to half of a second or 0.75. And I'll move this element down here. And I will also turn the opacity to 100%. I can hit rewind and play, and I see the animation. If I click the keyframe that got created out of that animation, I have my keyspline editor tool, which allows me to define the ease in and ease out of the animation. So in this case, the animation will go really, really, really quick, and then really, really, really slow. So it'll look something like that. Go a little fast and deaccelerate at the end. Now with the products, for example, I could do something just easier. Maybe at almost that 1 second, I'll turn this to 100%. Hit play. And then I have another set of icons here that I will also move out of my screen. So I'll turn my recording off, move my icons all the way to the right, turn my recording on again, and then here I'll move to 1 second and maybe slide the icons all the way there. Now in this case I want a little bouncy effect, so I'll probably gonna make them go all the way there, set to 100%. And I'll then make them come back somewhere around here. Somewhere like there. Now, if I hit rewind and play, it doesn't look that great. So what I need to do is I need to work on the ease in and ease out using my keyspline editor. So I'll make this go really fast and then slow at the end. And I'll do the same thing with this one. I'll make it go really fast and then slow at the end. Actually, slow at the beginning and slow at the end. Fast only in the middle. That's a little better. Now, the last thing I need to do is I need to get rid of this button, right? Because I don't want it anymore on screen 2. So I'll just I could go to screen 1 and actually all my button. So I'll just go here and set this to 0%. So let's press F5. And if I click the button fades out and I go to the next screen. So this is one of the many techniques that are available for you to go from screen to screen using a SAML-based platform like Silverlight or WPF. There are certainly other ways in which, for example, sometimes you do not necessarily want to have all your 100,000 elements in a single movie, right? So what you can do is after you click, and I believe I do have a little graphic for you here. So another way of doing this is after, if you're on screen number 1, you click the button, you would trigger a loader animation which will download or load a SAML, more SAML content for screen number 2. When it gets 100% loaded, you play the transition animation and then you get to screen 2. So that would be another way of doing it, which is loading SAML dynamically compared to the first technique, which is this one on top. So both ways are useful for you to use. The other thing are, I'll leave movie clips. Let's go back to these two that we skipped. Controls. So how do we deal with controls in Expression Blend? Let me create a new project. This is going to be a WPF project. But again, it doesn't really matter. For Silverlight 2 and WPF, the way you create controls or customize controls is going to be basically the same thing. So I'm going to show you going to show you how you use Expression Blend in the WPF workspace, but keep in mind that with Silverlight 2, as soon as Expression Blend supports customizing controls in Silverlight 2, it's going to be basically the same you're gonna see. Very, very similar. The Expression Blend 2.5 preview that we released a couple days ago still does not allow you to customize controls for Silverlight 2 in the design surface. You can do it via SAML. But in upcoming releases, you'll see that being incorporated. So the way this works here is, let me drag and drop that Power Play file that we created before, right here. I'll just copy these two elements, bring them into Window, and I'll make my window a little bigger, because when you talk about WPF, you of course do have a window, compared to Silverlight, where it's more like an in-browser experience. So I have my elements right there. And the way to do controls in WPF and Silverlight 2 is quite simple. The only thing you would do is you would select, let me select all these elements, and I'll group them all together into a single element. I'll right-click over it, and you will see we have two things. Make control, which is something I'll show you in a second. That's the closest thing we have to creating movie clips. So to the question of where are my movie clips, we'll get to that point. But if you go to Tools and hit Make Button, you will create a button. I guess this would be like, and I haven't used Flash in a while, but it's F8 or Shift 8, right, to create a button, movie clip, or graphic, right? So here we're going to create a new button. You can name your button, and that creates a button. Now, you can see this is already a button now. So let's just go and edit the template. The template of a button is like the blueprint of a control. It defines all the pieces that integrate your control. So let me switch here so we can see the different pieces. This is a button, and all those elements that were composing my graphic are now part of the button. So one of the things I can do is I can remove Content Presenter, and I think I will also set the glow of these elements to 0%, the opacity property actually to 0%, because this is my initial state, the initial state for my button. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to use something called triggers. I have a trigger for mouse over. So when I mouse over, I have different actions I can do. And what I'll do here is actions when activating for my mouse over. I will create a new animation, move the time slider to 1/2 second, and change the opacity to 100%. And I'll close this one. And when I go mouse over, I also have an action when deactivating, so when I roll out of the button. So to do that, I'll create a duplicate of my first storyboard, and I will reverse it, because I want the element to go back to where it was. And I'll simply select the new copy storyboard that I did there, and press F5. I know I'm going really fast here, but I roll in, I roll out, and we get the effect. So again, we don't have the concept of frames, like when you create a button in Flash, you get the 3 states and then the hit area, right? So here it works a little different. All the elements are there, and then you simply trigger elements. And again, I'm sorry, I'm going really fast, I'm sure, but luckily all of this is being recorded. And but this is the way, yeah, you can pause it later on. This is the way you would do control. So it's very visual, and the objective of Blend is to precisely help you do this in a visual way, just by tweaking properties visually, as we saw, rather than having to code. Now, let's go to one of the big questions that we always get. Where are my movie clips? That's one of the big ones. So let me show you where are your movie clips. Let me close this Expression Blend project, and let's close this one too. Create a new project. Also WPF. I'm choosing to use WPF in this case because I also want to give you a sense of the things that are possible with Silverlight 2. Silverlight 2 and WPF are getting much closer. You will find that Silverlight 2 will be very similar to this process that we're going to go through. So to show you this, I'm going to use some other graphics also by Dan Cook. He creates these wonderful characters. He has this series called Space Cute. It's pretty cute. And he's got different faces. By the way, all of these graphics are included as one of the samples in Expression Design. So feel free to tweak. We know people are starting to use these as avatars on different social environments on the web. But in this case, I selected this one. And what we're going to do is I'm just going to copy these elements from Expression Design into Expression Blend. And I think I copied the background too. I don't want the background. I just want the space cute guy. And what I'll do now is I will group all these elements into a single container. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that all this thing that I've been talking about on the left side of my screen, this object panel, is designers usually ask me, so why do the layers panel doesn't work or something? Well, it turns out that this is actually not a layers panel. And layers, furthermore, don't even exist in Silverlight and WPF. So no layers. There are no layers. What you get here is the entire collection of elements that are stacked on top of each other to assemble your user interface. That's another one of those breakthrough moments because, of course, layers have been with us for forever, right? So just keep in mind, layers do not exist. The other thing that doesn't really exist are groups. So there is no such thing as a group object. So what really happens when I right-click here and I say group, or I could just press Ctrl-G actually, is even though this feels like a group object and acts like a group object, it's officially or technically speaking not called a group object. It's simply a grid container control that contains all the elements inside of it. Now we have a collection of layout panels like grid, like canvas, like wrap panel, that provide different layout behaviors. So for example, I could change the layout type of this element to become a stack panel. And what the stack panel does is it stacks all the elements on top of each other. In this case, this is not the behavior that I'm looking for. What I want is I want to shrink down our character, by the way. But this is what a stack panel does. Another thing we could do here is we could change the layout type to wrap panel, for example. And wrap panel does exactly that. It wraps all the elements so that they fit within the area that we have in our region. That happens automatically. Now, the actual thing that I want to do here is I want to make this into a viewbox. Now, viewbox is a control layout panel that is available in WPF. It's currently not available in Silverlight 2, but hopefully it will be there by the time, in an upcoming release. And the great thing about viewbox is it does something very natural for all of us, which is simply rescaling things. That's all it does, but it's really great. So I'm going to make this character go a little smaller, and let's change the background because he's supposed to be a space boy. So let's change the background to go from black to maybe dark gray. Now we can see him a little better. And okay, how do I create my movie clip? Well, first thing is we call them user controls. It's a custom user control. So the way you do it is you simply right-click over the element that you want, your graphics, and you hit Make Control. And then you can type in the name for this guy. And in this case, let's call this Space Cute Boy. And now we get into our user control. So we don't no longer see everything else on the background. It's just that particular element. And one of the things that I can do here, very simply, I can just save. I close that XAML file. I'll press Ctrl-Shift-B, which will reload that project. And now this element is no longer that grid with all those elements. It's just one single unified element, our user control. Furthermore, one thing that you might have noticed is that when we did that, we got a new XAML file here called Space Cute Boy. So now you can share this control with other developers or designers. It also will show up down here under the asset library. We have all the controls like buttons and sliders and splitters and all the things that Silverlight 2 and WPF offer. But here under custom controls, we have Space Cute Boy. So what I can do is I can draw additional Space Cute Boys over here, maybe a little one back there. So that's the concept of a movie clip, right? So we call them user controls, and that's the way you do them. Now, one of the things that we've always used in movie clips is the ability to be able to include animation and then have that animation play. So I can edit my control by right-clicking over the element, and I will create a new storyboard. And let's switch to animation layout mode. And what I'll do is I will animate the boost or the flames that are going back there, here. And let's make this go really big, then really small, and then again, really big. Okay? And that's it. So I'll just save this, close this XAML file, press Ctrl-Shift-B to reload those changes. And now you probably saw that animation. Now, one thing that I forgot to do is to ask this animation to repeat forever, which is also one actually very common question we get. So let me go to my storyboard number 1, and let's look for my animated element. And the way what you do here is you expand all these different nodes. Scale is the property that I changed, right, when I scaled that element. So you simply need to right-click, hit Edit Repeat Count, click the infinity button, or you could type in a number of times you want this animation to repeat, and hit OK. And I'll save this, close, again, press Ctrl-Shift-B, and now they're, it's working. So let me go back here, and I think I'm going to skip this one, but I'll have to post it in my blog because I'm going a little late. But let's go into animation, because animation, again, the first thing that I tried when I joined Microsoft a couple of years ago that I tried to do using Blend was animating a bouncing ball. Principle of animation, universal principle of animation. I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it for a few months. But about a year and a half, 2 years ago, a year and a half actually, when we initially released the new preview of Blend, it was the first time that I was able to do it. And of course, now things have only been getting better. All this key spline editor that we have just enables you to do those kinds of things. Now, to understand animation, one of the things we need to understand is the terminology. I'm sure you've been hearing, even myself, I still don't get used to it, but using the words timeline, storyboard, animation, keyframe, all these different words. So all these words have specific meanings, and they target different things, completely different things. So timeline, there is no such thing as a timeline object in Silverlight or WPF. Timeline is simply the element that we have here, the user interface control that enables us to create animation. So this is the expression blend timeline. That's the way we call it. When you create an animation, or you want to move elements in Silverlight or WPF, that is actually called a storyboard. It's called a storyboard. A storyboard has inside of it something called animations, and animations have something inside of them called keyframes. They structure a little bit like this. You get a storyboard, which you can name any way you want. Then you have animations inside of it, and then you have the keyframes, which are these little dots that I'm sure you saw when we were animating this element. So different concepts that start creating more complex structures like this one over here. Now, That's one of the first things we need to do, understand the terminology. The second thing is you can create as many storyboards as you want, and our storyboards are time-based. So the concept of frames per second doesn't really exist. As you've noticed, what we're doing here is all these numbers represent seconds. So this feels much more closer to 3D Studio Max or Adobe After Effects, these tools where time is what matters rather than the actual frames per second. Although you can, of course, at the end choose any frames per second you want to export to in these other tools when you render the actual thing. Let me go directly to here, because again, I'm running a little late. The hand of timelines. One of the key things that I want to show you is the concept of hand of timelines. And for that, let me open, again, another instance of Blend. And I will show you this using a small baseball park little sample that we put together to explain this concept. So hand of timelines is a very cool property, part of the animation system in Silverlight and WPF. What it does is that if you have a storyboard playing and at some moment you want to go to a second storyboard, those two storyboards will automatically interpolate and they will hand off the responsibility of animating objects, creating smooth transitions between storyboards in a very easy way. Let me show you this, for example. This is a baseball park, of course. I'll go to my first storyboard, which in this case it's called throw to first, and I can play this storyboard, which will simply move the ball from home to first base. I'll go to the second one, and as we could expect, it throws the ball to the second base. This one to the third base. And home, it throws it to home. Because it's already there, we of course don't see any animation. Now let me show you what happens. I'll press F5, again, kind of like the Control-Enter in Flash. If I click first base, we get the expected result. But now look what happens if I click the second base. The ball goes to the second base, even though we never created that animation. I showed you the 4 animations we had, the 4 storyboards, again, storyboards that we had, and I never created that animation. So if I click the third base, we see that animation. Again, we never created that animation. It just knows. I can create, from third to first, and again, we never created that animation. So the typical challenge we've had for many years when we went to create multiple animations that target different scenarios, and we have to create a matrix of multiple animations. With hand of timelines, you can simply focus on the endpoints of different storyboards, and it'll just work. Now, one of the interesting things about here is that you can start playing another storyboard while the first one was running. So if I hit something like here, but then hit second base, you can get to the ball to switch in midair, which would, of course, be a magical ball arrow. But the cool thing about this is a very simple example that just shows the concept, but the possibilities of this in user interfaces is great. Because sometimes when you create user interfaces, you don't necessarily know how many elements are going to be displayed in your user interface controls. You do not necessarily know if users are customizing your panels. Maybe you're enabling people to customize panels. So you don't know how those things are going to react. So just by using endpoints in your storyboards, you can create these automatically interpolated storyboards, which is a very cool thing that we had there. The couple new things that we have in Expression Blend 2 as well are key-spline animation, which we already saw, right? The deceleration or acceleration control that we have there, ease in and ease out. Vertex animation is something new. Let me show you real quick. Let me just go here. I believe I have some trees. Oh, well, let's do it with health. This is the health indicator. This is supposed to be little assets for a game, actually. So let's paste this little heart, and let's create a new storyboard. And if I move this to 2 seconds, pressing the A key will switch me to the direct selection tool, something we have in Flash and Illustrator everywhere. I'll just select some of the vertices in here. And I can make this change a couple of those vertices. And you get, I guess this is the closest thing we have to shape tweening, which, of course, we have in Flash. So here, you can do different effects. So now we have vertex animation, which is something available in both WPF and Silverlight independently. Silverlight 1 and Silverlight 2, it's available in there. The other thing is animating a clipping path. So say I had, let's close this. Let's draw a circle on top of this element and select let's go here. Select these two elements, right-click, make clipping path. Now we only see that guy in there, right? Now if I wanted to animate that, so clipping paths are possible, but then you can also animate them. So if I go to maybe 4 seconds, I can again select the different elements that integrate my vector path and move them somewhere else. You can hit rewind and play, and you animate a clipping path. I could have also animated only one of those vertices, maybe something like that. So you can create all sorts of effects using this. Again, I'm going to have to skip this last part here, but I'll post a video on my blog, which I'll give you the link. The final thing I want to talk to you about is workflow. So as we mentioned, workflow is one of the big things that designers and developers go through. We've discovered different ways that designers and developers like to work with, and based on that learning, we are now encouraging designers and developers to work with them in one or another way. One of the typical ways that we see people working, which is a great way that I could definitely recommend to you, is something we call parallel, the parallel technique, which includes creating a wireframe in Expression Blend at the beginning, and then and this wireframe and something called a naming convention document enables developers and designers to reach an agreement at the beginning on different things. And that will help you have a parallel development and design track. So the designers can do their design work at the same time the developers are. At the same time, at the end, there is a stage of integration. Both designers and developers bring in their files together, and then they publish. So let me drive you through how one of those would look like. I will open, I have a clock little application here, so let's go to the wireframe. And I will also show you, right here we have MIX08, naming convention. This is the naming convention document. So the naming convention document, what it does is it helps designers and developers agree on the way they're going to name their objects. That's a critical part of the process, because if you as a designer animate all these nice looking graphics that we were dealing with throughout the session, and we happen to call them space, cute boy, and the developer just calls them user control 01, then of course when you get to the process of integration, the code is not going to be able to find those elements. So naming convention is pretty useful. And this is where we define how we're going to call our elements, guidelines for naming. This is the way that our wireframe for a clock would look like. Sometimes what we say is you would like to make you want to make wireframes even as ugly as possible, because if you don't, then you could affect or imply that the creative team has to obey certain things that are implied in the wireframe. So sometimes you just want to make it as abstract as possible. One of the things you will see here is that this wireframe already includes all of our elements, and all of our elements are named. For example, this, which is the second handle that will rotate, we should rename this as, if I could rename it, as seconds, because that is what our naming convention is telling us. It's a canvas, and it will rotate. And what I have here are also some animations, the animations that will make that canvas rotate, that handle. This is the minute animation, so it might take us 1 hour to see it all going out, so I'll just fast forward. But there you go. So this is the wireframe. Its base includes all the elements and all the names that we'll need. Now let's pretend we are the designers. So I'll go to see what the designers worked on. The designers took a copy of that wireframe, same copy, and they just started using Expression Design. These design elements actually came from Expression Design right here. And then from Design, they were taken to Blend, And now the same wireframe with the same naming elements that we have here, seconds, minutes, TXT AM, TXT hours, all these elements we had here. It's the same thing, it just looks gorgeous, right? Because we had a designer working on it. Now if I press F5, it doesn't work yet because we need to implement the code, which is, in this case, something that the developer would be doing. Now, let's pretend we're the developers, and let's open what the developers did. And, well, they didn't do this. This was the wireframe. What matters here is that if I press F5, because they work with the same wireframe, is they added the code that made the clock work. And now we get a fully functional clock right here. Now, even though I'm calling this being done by developers, honestly, the code to do this, I wrote it myself. I'm a designer. I really don't know how to code. So it wasn't really that hard. So when I say developers, I guess I actually mean development phase, which could be done by a designer who knows how to code, or a developer, certainly. But the developers included some of this code, right? A clock.javascript file, which again, if you're using Silverlight 2, could be a C# file. And let me show you the final result. The final result, well, actually, let's do the integration. That'll be the last thing that I do. So at that point, we're on this stage. The designers created something beautiful. The developers created something that works perfectly. Final step is integration. So to do the integration, what we could do is we would go to the clock that the designers created, select, oh, you know what, this is not going to work because I changed it. Let me just show you the final one. But what we would do is we would simply select the page.xaml file here, go to the one that the developers created, and replace the XAML file. And again, I'm pretty sure this is, oh, it is working. I thought it wasn't going to work. But yeah, so what we had, the ugly looking wireframe, but with the great functional code the developers created, now is using that XAML file that the designers created. So integration right now happened kind of magically, no errors, no issues. It was just copy-paste, perfect, ideal world. In the real world, this almost never happens. There are always challenges. Maybe we change the name of one of these elements, so the code from the developers is not finding that element, and you get an error. So that's why we have a specific stage here called the integration stage, which, again, I'm sure you've heard all these words like diviner or integrator. I personally like integrator a little bit more. The integrator will have to deal with those issues to make things work correctly. But the better that those two teams working in parallel obey the naming convention, the better you will do at the end. And to finalize, there are a couple other workflow options that we've seen. Ladder, which basically implies that the development team does all the development, and at the time they're finished, that's when the designers begin, and vice versa. You could also have a ladder where designers begin, and then developers take over after the design team begins. So this is not parallel development. And something I call the piggyback style, which is basically what you have here is a very strong development team creating the application, or a very strong design team creating the application, and then you have developers working for designers, or designers working for developers as, I guess, as slaves sometimes, because what they do is they get to provide only small little pieces of content. So in the case of developers working for a design-driven project for designers, developers would create small code snippets that designers would be integrating in a constant way. Every day, 5 snippets a day, something like that. It's a very iterative process. At the same time, you have a very strong development company, and you have designers in-house. These designers can create all the cool graphics, all the creativity that they have, and they can provide those small snippets of graphics, and developers would be integrating 5, 10 times a day. It's a very iterative process rather than a parallel process like the other one. And well, that's it. So we learned different things. We went through all those breakthrough moments that people go in that 1 week of the Artist in Residence event. So share all these tricks with your folks back there in your agency or development company. This is my blog. Feel free to visit for any, I'll keep posting all the assets, everything's going to be there. This Deep Zoom experience with that we use for the slides, I'm also going to make it available if you want to have a demo on Deep Zoom. And thank you very much. I'll just open the Q&A session and shoot anything you want. Thanks. So, any questions? Did I do such a great job?
I've got one. How did you create this presentation? Because that is so much more effective than PowerPoint.
Okay, I'll tell you. What I did is I created all my slides here in Expression Design. Here they are. So this is just text, of course, and then I basically just started creating all my elements. I initially, on Monday, my plan was to use Expression Design the way I'm doing it right now to navigate. But then, Deep Zoom came public, and it became possible to do this. We released Deep Zoom Composer, as you know, this little tool that enables you to create these kinds of things. And I was able to export this as a huge PNG, which I then brought into Deep Zoom Composer. And I believe I still have it here. By the way, after tweaking a few things, I think I broke the process, so I might not actually be able to show you how to get there. But what you do here in Deep Zoom Composer is you import an image, and you define how many other images you want to get. So right now I only have one image, but I could have other elements. For example, for all those samples of that Space Cute Boy and all those, I could have overlaid those elements here, and all those things could be navigated in this pseudo 3D space that we produce with Deep Zoom. And at the end you get export, and what export does, it generates a collection of images, and this collection of images are stored right here. By the way, Kirupa, one of our program managers for Expression Blend, he is the one who has been working on this among other people like Janet Perez and Peter Blois. Kirupa has a session after this one. It's called Designer Developer, Expression Blend Designer Developer, something like that. I'll tell you the exact name, but you should go to that one because they're going to talk about how to use Deep Zoom, and they're going to build a Deep Zoom experience. But basically what you get here is you get a collection of images. Let me show you this one, for example. A bunch of little images. And all these little images are the things that Silverlight starts dealing with. So what Deep Zoom Composer helps you to do is it slices all those images automatically for you. Otherwise, it would be a nightmare to do it manually. But yeah, go to Celso and do you have a guide? Because maybe I'll tell you the exact name, but Celso and Kirupa, they both work for the Expression Blend team. It's a session, the last one, right? Applications equals designers plus developers, CT06. They're going to be showing Deep Zoom and how to use it. Mm-hmm.
Hi. I'm wondering in Blend 2 or in supportive Silverlight 2, have you guys added anything like alignment or grids or guides or rulers or anything like that to help lay out your page?
We have a couple things there. We do not have guides in particular, but that's one of the top requirements that we're getting, so we're definitely going to be working on incorporating guides eventually. But we do have a grid, so this little button down here, it's a grid, and you can, of course, change or define the grid to have different sizes. Let me see, I believe this is where it is. This is where you define grid, snapping. One of the other things we have in terms of snapping, which is pretty useful, if you draw, for example, a rectangle, is it on? Let me see if it's on. Yeah. You might notice those pink stripes that show up. That immediately starts helping you lay out elements. Those elements, this separation also shows in between elements. So if you want to quickly lay out panels, they can all have the exact same separation. You can tweak those parameters. So those are some of the things that we have. Yeah. Any other question? Okay. More question here.
Baseball example, the ball, when it went to second base and the shit got smaller, is that my eyes, or that just 2D object, or?
Oh, yeah. In the animation, I changed two things when doing that animation. I changed the position of the object, but also changed the size of the object. So that gave it that 3D perspective effect. Yeah. And okay, couple more. Yeah.
You showed us in expression design you had a rollover built into that envelope with the button and everything. And you exported that, and it looked like it all.
This one?
All that was it created the thing, and you just turned it off and on. Right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, basically I just played with these elements. Yeah. Okay. A question in Portuguese, I'll do my best.
Quanto tempo a Microsoft acha que vai demorar para expandir a Silverlight para todas as máquinas do mundo?
Oh, so the question is how much time is it going to take Microsoft to deploy Silverlight in all the computers in the world? Great question. Yeah. So that's certainly not very much related to the session, but I can just say that, we're doing great progress, and, thanks to all of you guys who, will start playing with Silverlight, we'll probably get together there, pretty soon. That's my answer. Political answer.
I'm also an evangelist. Can I help you with that answer too?
Please do.
Yeah. Is the microphone open? Okay, I'm an UX evangelist too in Microsoft Brazil. So I could answer in Portuguese, but I'm going to answer in English. So the thing is, we count on your talent to develop rich stuff, great stuff, so rich, so nice that people will download the plugin. It's way more effective than, I don't know, Windows Update or whatever we could do from our perspective. If you create something really good and viral, that's happening right now in China. In China, we created some nice experiences, and it's viral when it's good. The speed in which people download the plugin is way faster than we can control. So it depends on what you create, on your talent to create a viral and rich experience that people want to share. I mean, this sharing experience is really important to the download of the plugin. Yep, that's it. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much, and hope to see you around. Have fun. Thanks.